Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one, we're going to be going over the best build for each affinity, at least my best build for each one, all 13 of them, so many builds to go through. This is going to be an awesome video, can't wait to get into the details on this one. If you want to keep your browsing safer and more private, you can get 3 extra months free on a yearly subscription of ExpressVPN, the VPN I use and trust, in the description below. There's also 20% off of G Fuel with the code YOURAVERAGEGAMER, all capital letters. Now let's jump into the first one here. We're going to be doing Sacred Affinity, and for this we're using Prayerful Strike on the Great Curved Club. Now, as far as the build itself, you can put this on the Great Mace. There's actually several different things you can do with this build, but Prayerful Strike and Sacred Affinity is absolutely fantastic. It does a lot of posture damage, and on top of that, you're also getting healing on each hit. This is very good for tank builds because you can tank a lot of hits and heal back a lot of HP. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Sacred Curved Club with Prayerful Strike. We're using the Erdtree Seal because we're a Faith build. Random set of armor on, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, the Defense tier, the Holy tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, as you can see, we're a Faith build because we're in Sacred Affinity, so it's going to scale with our Faith stat. And we have 60 Vigor, 25 Mind, a fairly good amount of Mind, 25 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow, Black Flames Protection for some extra defense, and Blessings of the Erdtree for more HP. This is definitely a personal favorite build for me too. I don't use Sacred Affinity that much because holy damage is very resisted in Elden Ring. I'm going to show another clip here what you could do to NPC invaders, and be sure to comment your favorite affinity during this video. Well, in this case, not an NPC invader, but one that has basically the same moveset, and you can keep smashing over and over again and continuing to heal back HP. The next one up here we're going to be covering is another favorite in Flameheart Affinity. Flameheart Affinity is absolutely a favorite for me because I love Faith builds. Now, as far as Flaming Strike goes, the first part actually scales with your strength stat, but the second part, the follow-up part, is weapon AR, and once the swords are on fire, you can even do jump attacks for massive damage if you're building up on successive hits. And no, it's not really discount bleed because you can throw in a bunch of fire incantations if you want to as well, and the actual Ash of War itself is quite good. Flaming Strike is a very good Ash of War. It's probably my favorite in the game in terms of fire, and it does a lot of damage. The follow-up attack is quite good, and setting the swords on fire will give the Bandit Curved Swords over 700 AR, which is really impressive. That's a lot of AR for a curved sword, a regular curved sword. Let's jump into equipment for this awesome build and setup. Definitely try this one out if you're looking for more variety, and you could throw in fire incantations. As I mentioned, we have 2 Flameheart Bandit Curved Swords with Flaming Strike on both. We have the Erdtree Seal, random set of armor on, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Raptor's Black Feathers, and the Claw Talisman, Fire tier, Defense tier. Let's jump into stats. For stats, it's the same as the first one. We have 70 Faith. If you're using the Faith tier, you can get that to 80, 60 Vigor, 25 Mind, 25 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessing of the Erdtree again for some extra HP. All in all, this is a solid, powerful fire build. I'm going to show another clip here. And this is a quick clip, and by the way, at the bottom there you could see the Bandit Curved Swords get over 700 AR when they have the fire imbued on them. I believe that's how you say that. Anyways, as far as the tree avatar here, jump attacks, combining that with the Ash of War, you can throw in different fire incantations. You can destroy bosses very quickly with an awesome build and setup like this one, and it has a lot of versatility. Next up here, we have Poison Affinity. By the way, if you need a little bit of a boss guide, this is all on New Game Plus 7, by the way. Journey 27 currently. We actually went all the way from Golden Shade up to the final boss of the game, or at least Radagon. I ended up cutting out Elden Beast. But anyways, if you need a little help as far as a boss guide on top of the builds, we're going to be going along here into the end game as well. So if you struggle with any of the bosses, you can watch how I play, and me being pretty much average at games at best, you could probably learn something because eventually you will memorize some of the movesets, but overall, if you do enough damage, if you're in this case, we're using a Poison Affinity, so if you're patient, you're going to end up having a payoff there too. Overall, you can see we did a lot of damage right from the start, around 20 to 22,000 immediately with successive attacks and the deadly poison buildup in Poison Affinity. Yeah, Poison Affinity can be really powerful because you can add in Kindred of Rot's Exaltation and the Mushroom Crown for 30% more damage, and then if you're using the Venomous Fang, you can actually get deadly poison for a longer duration and a quicker build-up on it when you're in Poison Affinity. They are, in my opinion, the best weapon in the game to use Poison Affinity with. And with the deadly poison, you're going to get damage that's similar to rot. If you're patient, you can get a lot of damage that way. And then since we're building on successive attacks, as I mentioned, in between we're able to get a lot of damage too. That being said, the second phase of the Fire Giant's a little bit more difficult because his weak points are harder to hit. Also on New Game Plus 7, he'll have around 64,000 HP. The only boss in the game that has more HP than him on New Game Plus 7 is Rykard at 105,000. Believe it or not, that's actually true. Rykard has 105,000 HP, roughly around there, in New Game Plus 7. And the Fire Giant can make the fight go down to the wire, no question. He ended up killing me, I think, once, and I got him on the second try. He wasn't too troublesome. The most troublesome one in this video ended up being Lightning Affinity, where we took on Godfrey, and I think that took around 5 or 6 tries. But that being said, it was actually a smooth run from Golden Shade all the way up until the end game. So this is a little bit longer a fight. I'm going to keep you interested, and in the comment section below, definitely be sure to comment your favorite affinity, but also I asked a while back what your toughest boss was, what the hardest boss for you personally was. Curious about this as well. What was the boss that other people told you was hard, and then it ended up being really easy for you? For me, that ended up being Moog the first time around. I'm curious as to what your opinions are on that. Be sure to comment below. Let me know what boss was supposed to be hard and ended up being way easier than you expected. And as we finish off the Fire Giant here, he has to give me trouble at the end when he has basically no HP. We're going to be going over the build, equipment, stats, everything you need to know. But as far as Poison Affinity itself, I cannot recommend the Venomous Fang more. I believe you are in good hands when you're using this specific weapon. I hope you guys enjoyed that battle with the Fire Giant. Took a little bit more time using poison only, but the ticks were pretty good. The amount of health that was being taken off was fairly good because he's got a lot of HP. We have the Venomous Fang in Poison Affinity plus 25 preferably. Any seal will do. The Mushroom Crown, Kindred Rod's Exaltation, Melissen's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Ritual Swords Talisman, Faith Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into stats. And by tick, I mean damage per second that comes off of the boss, and the more HP they have, the more HP they lose. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. We have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, 45 Dexterity, and soft cap of 45 Arcane. The next affinity is going to be Blood Affinity. Now for Blood Affinity, you have a ton of choices. If you want to go Strength Arcane, I recommend the Gargoyle's Twin Blades, but for me, I'm going Dex Arcane, and in that case, I really like the Bandit Curved Swords. I think they appear, by the way, in at least 3 of these affinities, and it goes to show their versatility that they have. From Blood to Lightning to the Flame Art affinity, they really are an awesome weapon. They have a lot of range too because they're longer for the curved swords, and as you can see on screen here against the Godskin duo, the Sleeping Godskin duo, they're taking a ton of damage. One thing of note to mention real quick about bleed builds is when you're facing any boss, their resistances are basically at the beginning, it'll be something like 300, then 500, 700, etc. So as you move further into the fight, it actually becomes more difficult to proc bleed, which makes those bleed procs later in the fight or very late in the fight, especially if a boss has a lot of HP, more difficult to get. So you want to make sure you're getting good AR and damage in between the procs as well. Let's jump into equipment. And for this, we have 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Blood Affinity with Seppuku on them. Any seal will do. We have the White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Melissen's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Claw Talisman, Faith Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats here, we once again, same as the Venomous Fang build, if you want to try out both of these, we have 45 Dexterity, 45 Arcane, 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs. And next up is going to be Cold Affinity, and I know there's a lot of jump attacks in this video, but Cold Affinity goes really well with having an opposite offhand in Blood Affinity, especially when you're using Chilling Mist. You're going to see a huge proc of damage where we get both Bleed and Frost build up here shortly. And there it is on Q, and I believe it was around 6,000 damage. That was actually the Frost proccing as well as the Bleed at the same time. You can see why Frost and Bleed builds are quite good. Let's jump into equipment for this awesome setup. For equipment, we have 1 Sword and Blood Affinity with Seppuku on it. We have the other one in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist, White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers, any seal will do, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Melissen's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Claw Talisman, Faith Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats here, we have 45 Dexterity and 45 Arcane. Once again, 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance. You can do all these past 3 builds with the same stats, Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs. And next one up as we move along is a personal favorite, and that's Magic Affinity. And for this, we're going to be using Ice Spear, and we can even add Terra Magica to this. Ice Spear scales both with Dexterity and with Intelligence, so there's a big plus there. So you can put it in Magic Affinity for good damage, and you can also put it in Keen Affinity for good damage. This combos really well with the Guardian Swordspear. I'm starting to love the Guardian Swordspear given its awesome base damage and the amount of versatility the weapon has as a whole too. The different number of Ashes of War that you can use to make the weapon powerful, and Ice Spear is certainly no slouch. Yeah, definitely give this one a try. It's pretty fun to use too, and you can throw it in Magic Affinity, Cold Affinity, or Keen Affinity, so you do have a lot of options. You actually have 3 options in total. It's a great weapon, the Guardian Swordspear, and it mixes really well with Ice Spear. Yeah, all in all, Ice Spear is essentially becoming easy mode. I recommend trying this out for dexterity builds because it gives you a little bit of versatility there, and I recommend trying it out for magic builds too. There are some better magic options like Knight, Comet, Comet Exert, etc. But that being said, you can use a Magic Affinity Guardian Swordspear, have a lot of fun with it, take advantage of the power of Ice Spear. And after that fight's over, by the way, we are going to be moving on to Ashen Capital, where we will take on Gideon, Godfrey, and then Radagon. I did, as I mentioned, cut out Elden Beast because the video ended up being a little longer than expected, though. Let's jump into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have the Guardian Swordspear and Magic Affinity with Ice Spear. Any staff, any seal will do. Random set of armor on if you want to check that out. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Faith Tier, Magic Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 50 Intelligence, 20 Dexterity, 23 Mind, 25 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow. We can get to 33 Faith, so we can add in Hellish Brewery for even more damage, and we're also using Terra Magica to boost it as well. And the next one up is Keen Affinity, where we'll be using Double Slash on the Nagakiba. You can also use it on the starting Katana with Blood Flame Blade. A combination now that is likely better than the Rivers of Blood after it has been nerfed somewhere in the realm of 3 to 5 times between PvE and PvP, and as you can see on screen here, we're able to get a good amount of bleed procs, and the damage in between the procs is solid in Keen Affinity. Because unlike Blood Affinity, where you're going to deal with a little bit of a physical damage reduction, we don't have to worry about that here. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Keen Nagakiba with Double Slash. Any seal will do. We're using the White Mask, random set of armor on, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, Faith Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into stats. For stats here, we're all about dexterity because we're in Keen Affinity. We have 75 dexterity, the 18 strength you need in case you want to dual wield the Nagakiba, 60 vigor, 23 mind, 25 endurance. Buffs are Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. And the next affinity up here is Lightning Affinity, a really fun one to use, and another one that has a huge advantage if you're willing to do jump attacks, because guess what? You can add lightning damage with Lightning Slash, giving us more AR and solid damage between the successive attacks, jump attacks, as well as boosting lightning damage. And much like the Fire build, you can do that with the Fire tier and then the Fire Scorpion Charm as well to continue to boost the fire damage there. For here, we're going to use the Lightning Scorpion Charm and the Lightning tier on top of some successive attack stuff, as well as the Claw Talisman. Now, I was switching between builds, and I forgot to use the Raptor's Black Feathers here. You would want to use that too, though I do want to mention that I do have enough endurance for this character, and for a lot of these builds, most of these builds, to hit 51 poise as well. You're just going to have to throw on some heavy pants and the rest of your armor, because the Raptor's Black Feathers are relatively light. That being said, we do a lot of damage. It's a lot of successive attack build up here, and then the lightning damage itself is quite impressive. Is it less impressive that we have to resort to jump attacks again? Well, maybe, maybe not, but that being said, Lightning Slash is for me the best of the Lightning Affinity Ashes of War. I do like Thunderbolt too, but the damage is a little bit underwhelming. That being said though, you can spam it, which is nice, and it can give you a lot of quick damage from a distance. Yeah, it is really a good Ash of War Thunderbolt and can be used in a variety of situations, but on New Game Plus 7, the damage just isn't there. As I mentioned, it is a little bit underwhelming, and Lightning Slash as a whole is going to be so much better when you're doing the jump attacks. The Ash of War itself isn't too bad either. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment and stats for this powerful build and setup. Once again, showing off the versatility of the Bandit Curved Swords, we have 2 with Lightning Slash and Lightning Affinity. Any seal will do. Raptor's Black Feathers will go well with this. Lightning Scorpion Charm, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, Claw Talisman, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. Let's talk about stats. And for the stats itself, we have 60 vigor, and once again, much like the Negakiba build, I kept it with the 18 strength so you can use both builds. We have 75 dexterity, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs. And the next one up is Fire Affinity. Much like Heavy Affinity, Lion's Claw pretty much wins it for me. It's an awesome Ash of War. The damage is incredible. The posture damage is incredible. I didn't want to do two of the same, so I have a different one for Heavy, but for Fire Affinity, we chose Lion's Claw. And aside from me getting hit just once, we actually end up with a beatdown of Radagon here where he just takes a lot of damage because he has 0 fire resistance, and not only that, we're able to get a big posture break and a nice critical hit in as well. Yeah, Lion's Claw is the definition of reliability. I actually have an early game Guts Greatsword guide on my channel if you're new to Elden Ring. It's a great way to start out, and not only start out, it can actually carry you, Lion's Claw on Guts Greatsword, from the beginning all the way into the end game. It's that powerful and that reliable. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Fire Greatsword with Lion's Claw, Guts Greatsword as we call it. We have a random set of armor on, any seal will do, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Erdtree Favor +2, Faith Tier, Fire Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, a good amount of Mind at 25, 31 Endurance, so we can deal with the weight. Erdtree's Favor +2 is helping us with that also. We have 65 Strength. When we're two-handing it, we have 90-something Strength, and Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are our buffs. And for Occult Affinity, we're going to be showing off the Scavenger Curved Swords. I actually chose to use a little bit different of a build here, but you can run Seppuku on both and then just run a really powerful jump attack build, of course, like any of the bleed builds. That being said, I wanted to add a little bit of range and versatility. Done this in a video previously where we throw in Blood Blade along with the jump attacks. That allows you not only to get the jump attack damage, the successive attack build up, and the bleed build up, but when you back off from a boss or an enemy, you can then use Blood Blade for some distance bleed build up and a good amount of damage too. Now, is running this build technically the best? The best would probably just to run Seppuku on both and then use the same exact type build that I was using for the Bandit Curved Swords, but I wanted to show something a little bit different that I like using and throwing in, and you can get a lot of damage and bleed this way too. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have 2 Scavenger Curved Swords on Occult Affinity, and then we have Bloodblade on one and Seppuku on the other. We have the White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers, Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ronin Sword Insignia, Claw Talisman. We have the Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we have 70 Arcane because we're going to be scaling with a B in Occult Affinity as far as Arcane goes. This way we don't have to split our stats, something I really like about the Scavenger Curved Sword. 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs. And the next one up here is Heavy Affinity. Now, Lion's Claw would also fit in first for me at Heavy and Fire Affinity. It really is the best Ash of War for Heavy in my opinion, and Royal Knight's Resolve is great too, but I wanted to show my second favorite one, which is Wild Strikes with the Rusted Anchor, which can be really good in terms of successive attack build-up, and then the amount of damage you can get with the A scaling for the Rusted Anchor. This build can really chew through bosses' HP quite literally after you build up some successive attack damage, and then you can also even get some counter damage if you run something like the Spear Talisman, because we're going to be doing pierce damage too. Yeah, this is definitely a favorite for damage and for fun, but overall the build actually impressed me when I started using Rusted Anchor with the Wild Strikes. I realized how good it was, and then continued to use it more and more, and there's so many bosses in the game that you can absolutely destroy with the amount of damage you get with this build. Let's jump into equipment for this one. And for equipment, we have the Rusted Anchor plus 25 and Heavy Affinity with Wild Strikes. Any seal will do. Shard of Alexander, Rotten Sword Insignia, Ritual Swords Talisman, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Faith Tier, Thorny Tier. Let's jump into the stats on this one. And for stats, we once again, this is the same setup as we did with Lion's Claw. We have 65 Strength. When we're two-handing it, it's 90-something Strength. We have 60 Vigor, 25 Mind, 31 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs, and I definitely recommend trying this one out. It's really fun, too. No doubt a personal favorite there. And the next affinity we have is Quality Affinity, where we're going to be showing off the Zweihander, if that's how you say it. I can never say the word properly. And we're going to be using Giant Hunt, which is pretty close to Lion's Claw too, but this is a weapon and a build I like using in Quality Affinity for a lot of damage. Yeah, given the damage you can get in Quality Affinity with this, we have around 50 Strength when we're two-handing it and 50 Dexterity, and as you can see, it's pretty substantial. Giant Hunt, like Lion's Claw 2, will also do poise damage, so there's that as well. As you see the big posture break here, huge benefit there. And there's the critical hit for massive damage. That's just the magma worm. I threw in some side bosses at the end because after we defeated the main bosses, I just looked to see what I had available. I am mainly playing on Xbox Series X. The magma worm goes down for an awesome build with Giant Hunt. Let's jump into equipment on this one. For equipment, we have the plus 25 Zweihander with Giant Hunt and Quality Affinity. Any seal will do. We hit 51 poise, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Urchu's Favorite plus 2, Faith tier, Stone Barb Crack tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this one, we have 35 strength, but when we're two-handing it, we're going to be at 51 strength, right around there. We have 50 dexterity, 60 vigor, 24 mind, 27 endurance. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs, and the reason this will add up to 160 is because we're using the Faith tier. And the last one on here is Standard Affinity. Now, Standard Affinity is a little bit of a joke because overall, most of the weapons in the game, you're going to find an affinity that is much better than Standard. That being said, I chose to use the Naginata with Repeating Thrust and Blood Flame Blade. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't rank the affinities, it's because so many of the affinities are for different styles of play that it would be a little bit difficult for me to rank them. And I'm one of those people that's going to probably tell you, at least most of the time, to try a whole bunch of different builds and go with what you like the most. And we're going to jump into equipment for this one. And for equipment, we have the Naginata and Standard Affinity with Blood Flame Blade, Repeating Thrust, White Mask, any seal will do in this case, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, that's Market Shackle, it's an item by the way, Faith tier, Thorny tier, here's the stats. And you'd go higher dex with a little bit of strength because we have a C in dexterity and a D in strength. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade for our buffs. And next thing up here is a channel update for those that stuck around before we get to the ending of the video. That being said, if you haven't subbed to this channel yet, now's the time to subscribe, so be sure to hit that sub button. Channel update is just about build requests. I know I've been getting a lot of them lately, more than usual since Christmas time. Keep in mind I do add it to a list and I'm keeping track of everything, but that being said, I'm getting so many of them lately, it's a little bit hard to keep up with. I may start doing individual small builds between 3 and 5 minutes on my alternate channel. If that's something you guys would be interested in, be sure to comment below, let me know, and then I can start doing that to get through some of these build requests. And there's been a lot lately. It's been really busy since Christmas time, and there's been so many of them. But again, I do keep a list, and I am keeping track of them. That being said, just getting a lot of stuff lately. I really appreciate the comments, feedback, a lot of positive stuff since Christmas time too, so I appreciate that. I can't wait for DLC. I'm so excited for it. Definitely be sure to sub if you haven't subbed to this point. You're going to want to be subscribed to this channel when DLC comes around. I think we're just shy of 20,000 subs now by the time this video is out. I can't even believe it at this point. It has actually surpassed what I've ever imagined this channel could ever be, so that's amazing, and I appreciate everyone. Absolutely love this community. Be sure to join the Discord in the pinned comment. Be sure to sub, and as always, thanks for watching.